What can Manchester United learn from Liverpool? Well, I'm joined today by JJ Bull.
Hello.
And John Mackenzie.
Hello.
To find out the answer to the question that I just asked. Let's set this up, John, because Liverpool obviously just beat Manchester United 3-0 over the weekend. Bit of a humiliating defeat. How is it that Liverpool have managed to navigate that big transition, a huge era-defining coaching change within 3 games, and yet Ten Hag's been at Man United for 2 full seasons and a few games, and they're still languishing?
Yeah, and Ten Hag is coming at the end of a process of Manchester United going through the same thing, right? Losing a dynastic coach and then trying to relive the glory days through replacements of players and coaches, and it hasn't worked. So yeah, I think that's the big question. I think the difference between what Liverpool have done and what Manchester United have done is that Liverpool have had this longer term process whereby the club is being run in a smart way. The club has an identity, a tactical identity, an identity as to how they want to play, and the players and the managers are subsequent to that identity and game model. So I think the big question going forward is whether or not Manchester United can get on that same trajectory with their new ownership, Ineos. They can implement that process so that it doesn't become the case that they're like, well, we need to bring in a new manager to fix things, or we need better players to fix things. So I think going forward, the big question is whether or not Manchester United can follow in that line after Liverpool.
I mean, John mentioned identity there, JJ, and we will come back to talk about what specifically United can learn from that at Liverpool. But I think we need to diagnose the problem at Manchester United first. And one of the key criticisms that people are making is that Ten Hag's been there for 2 years and they can't see an identity on the pitch, which you don't think is completely fair.
No, we hear this an awful lot, and we tried to dispel it a few times with different videos we've made on this channel. But I can see why people say that, but we can actually see quite clearly, I think, from the Liverpool game what Man United are trying to do under Ten Hag. Now, he said in the past he wants to make them the best transitional team in the world. He basically just wants to attack. He wants to create space and attack space, play forward, play through lines, play over a press. And you see it against Liverpool. This is the kind of team that they had here. It's like a 4-2-3-1. The numbers don't matter. What they're trying to do a lot of is draw Liverpool onto them to create space so that they can attack. They've got wingers high and wide. They want to run out of defence. They had Xerxes playing rather than Højlund. So what Xerxes' job was to do was to drop in a little bit to offer receiving a pass, and then that would hopefully drag a player out. So what you do is create this sort of shape in the back four. Obviously a back four, you want mostly a flat line. The idea then is that creates space in behind for someone like Fernandes to run into, Rashford run into, Garnacho run into. And by creating, it's like a sort of bad version of De Zerbiism, because this is what you have at United is we know what they're trying to do, they're just not doing it very well. There is an identity, the identity just kind of sucks. So right. This is the problem. What they're trying to do is build them back. So in build up, you'll have players drop back a little bit. The fullbacks, when they're building up, will maybe stay wide like this. You might have one player drop in. So what they're trying to do is throw players forward to kind of front load the opposition, but then create space in other places like Xerxes dropping in. And it means that if you're in vulnerable positions like this and you lose the ball, you then only have maybe 1, 2, 3 players to stop these players running at you. That's one thing they're trying to do. But they also want to make sure what they can do, if they can, is play quick passes through the line, so they can get one-touch passes through, they can play through a press. If they invite the pressure onto them by doing this exact thing, and Liverpool or whoever they're playing against pushes up, then they can have someone who plays over the top of the pressure, so they play through or over pressure.
So a cool sounding identity, maybe just not quite working on the pitch.
So what we're starting to see, or have maybe seen for a long time, is that the structure makes sense but is sometimes lacking. And is that because the coaching is not good enough, or the players aren't carrying out the instructions, or are the players making mistakes within the structure?
Oh, the key questions, JJ.
And I think we can summarise all of them with 46 slides on Casemiro. So I want to look at Casemiro. So all the things we talked about, dragging the back four out of shape and creating space the way they want to do it. So from the very start of the game against Liverpool, what you saw was that Man United kicked off, they passed back, Casemiro plays a bounce pass off Mainu, and then they go back to Casemiro, who goes backwards. It's all backwards to encourage Liverpool onto them. So we know Liverpool are going to press them man-to-man, they're going to go high. United are trying to bait them early on. It's a thing we've seen a lot of teams doing now. So the idea being that when the ball goes backwards and Liverpool push up, they then play over the pressure, those long passes from Onana. This is where we begin our series of slides. Onana has kicked the ball long. I think it's Onana anyway, but it goes long. And what you see here is that Man United, when the ball goes long, they're going to try and win the second ball and then attack quickly with the things they've set up. So This is Van Dijk coming at the back four. You'll notice the back four is pulled apart because someone's dropped in. The ball's gone towards Fernandes. He wins the header. Casemiro's watching it intently. Now, this is not the exact flight of the ball, but it's close enough to what it does. And Casemiro is back here, circled in black here. Masraoui and De Ligt are going to deal with this. When the ball goes forward, they're going to be able in place to win that second ball, because you can see there's 3 players around 1, so Liverpool shouldn't win that. Which means when the ball bounces, it's probably going to bounce to where Casemiro is. So he's looking here with his robot laser eyes, and then he looks behind him over his shoulder to see where the ball's going to go. He knows the ball's going to land next to him, and then they're going to try and get these one-touch passing moves to go forward through the pressure. So when the ball drops, it comes to Casemiro. He now knows who's around. It's going to be Xerxes, who's going to drop in to drag the shape out of the back four from Liverpool. And Casemiro is going to play that in. And then you start seeing the stuff they're doing, which is not structure, it's coaching and attacking patterns. So you come into here to Xerxes, who will then play a first-time pass, and immediately you've got an attack. You're running at players with Garnacho and Rashford on the other side. That should be, in theory, dangerous. They might not get a chance from it, but they can then follow up, counter-press, and win the ball that way. So we're seeing all the things they want to do. And the result of that is that you leave 6 Liverpool players behind the ball. So by doing this, by pulling them out, going for this risky second ball, roll of the dice, you can create moments where you can then attack a team like Liverpool on the attack. So that's really good. They're also doing things like up, back, and throughs. There are clear patterns in play. Here's Masraoui and Casemiro, again involved in this play. So what they want to do here is see Xerxes going to drop in, drag the shape out, because they're going to play up, back, and then that should give you a next pass for a through. So the ball goes up, back, exactly here. Casemiro's here. Now, if Casemiro can play this pass in, oh boy, golly gosh, Fernandes is clean in behind. That is probably a goal, if not a high XG chance, which is what you want. Everything they're doing here is fine. Except what you've got are the instructions from the manager are being carried out perfectly, but technical errors then creep in, and you don't get these with high-level players, so expert players. Now, Xerxes has an easy pass to play here. All he's got to do is play it to the right side of Casemiro, and he can play that pass. He plays it to his left foot, and so Casemiro is then off balance and weighted. You can sort of see him if you zoom in here. It doesn't really do much for us, but he's off balance. He's got to play on his left foot now because he's anticipated it on his right foot. Someone like Toni Kroos or Modric would put that right onto his right foot, and then he just smacks it off Van Dijk's head. So he looks bad. Casemiro looks bad in this situation. But I would argue it's maybe, is that unfair, John, to say it's unfair, the technical error by Xerxes, would you say?
You can say whatever you like. I think that's the beauty of being an analyst. If you think it's his fault, it's his fault.
I know it's his fault. So here's technical errors by other teammates from Man United. So again, the manager can instill them with confidence, tell them where to be and when, but you can't
do it for them, James.
Yeah, if someone makes a mistake, like, mumbling over their words, you can't correct them for that. That's my fault.
That's right.
Same as the players here. We all make mistakes, don't we all? Now here's Casemiro. He is in the right position here. You can see the fullbacks are wide as fullback should be. You've got 2 players in here. When the ball comes in from the defender, what they want to do is turn. He wants to turn through this pressure. See Liverpool players here? If he turns, that's 5 players out of the game. So then they can turn and attack, and you've got players in position up the way. So you've got 4 attackers higher up. Garnacho's out of shot. So they can just turn through it. Should be really easy. When the ball comes in, so like Casemiro's looking, right? So he can see, he knows where the next pass is going to go. He knows this is going to happen because they've been told in training this is what to do. Play through Casemiro to play up because you can't play forward. So when the ball comes into him, he wants to turn, like his body shape, he wants to turn anti-clockwise. That's the way clocks go.
No.
And then he can turn. Well, they go clockwise.
Yeah, the clocks go clockwise.
He's going against time.
Yeah.
Apart from in Australia, they go the other way around.
Sure, of course.
That's true, yes. And he wants to beat time itself, Casemiro, with this. It should be really easy to do as well. We can take the ball on his right foot and turn, but the ball is weighted to his left side. And so he has to then turn anti-clockwise, the other way.
That's his right side.
The opposite way,
Yeah.
But he's through the pressure. If the ball had come in slightly faster onto the foot he wanted, he'd be through it. He's got to turn and make an adjustment, which then means when he spins, he's kind of, if you spin, you're a bit off balance when you then try to start walking again. So he plays it on his left foot. This is an error by Casemiro because he's off balance. There's reasons for it. Regardless, technical error by Casemiro. The ball goes to Fernandes, who I don't know why, he backs off. You can't really see it in this still frame, but he backs off the pass. He should be going towards it. Another error, I think, in my opinion. So the ball is lost and it's stolen by Robertson, and then Liverpool have it. But we've seen in the past with United, what we have is when they play, again, part of the identity is that they keep these players up here and they maybe put players up to join them in the midfield, and it's always created this big long space behind. There's more identity because we see it constantly because they're playing it long with a back 4 which is deep to try and then counter press to win it and then go from here, but it creates this space. And the same thing, when they get attacked, these players come back like Menu, Martinez, De Ligt, the fullbacks, and they still keep the space rather than being this, like here, it's, I'll do a different colour so you can see what I'm talking about. It's then the space here.
Yeah.
It's worth noting, I think, that this is one of the big points that Guardiola makes, in that because Manchester United are playing so direct, it means when the ball goes forward quickly, it can come back quickly. There's a famous Juan Leo quote about that. And that's partly what's at stake here, is that if you are sort of trying to play direct one-touch passes through lines and you're throwing players forward to do that, if you lose the ball, you then are open to counter-attacks, and that, I think, it was evident in this game.
It's probably a pattern you want to be able to pull out the bag rather than relying on it. So like if that situation occurs, you can use it rather than just going straight through. Like an exact example is when those players are back, you then have no out ball. So here's Casemiro, he wants a short pass to play through lines, he can't. He's got to go long, attack the space, and then he just lose the ball. So the ball then comes back because Liverpool win it back straight away. So the instructions the manager wants to play are high risk. I don't know if the reward is particularly high in these situations. And then you get player errors, and then your confidence drops, momentum drops. So this is what we get. The identity is there. Does the identity work? Is the coaching instructions working?
Yeah.
Lots of things.
It's the intersection between the instructions and then the player quality as well, right? Because I think it's fair to say Ugarte coming in, he's not a player who's perfect at distributing the ball.
That's a really good point. So they don't have the players to play those passes in the midfield. Manu is a carrier. He's also, I mean, this is his first starting full season, right? Really, because he was injured last season, and he's very young. He's a carrier. Ugarte likes to play safe and sideways. He won't be playing those forward passes because he doesn't do that. Casemiro doesn't really do that. He had players who were progressive.
Really did that,
he was the anchor. Yeah. And so they lack the players to be able to do what Ten Hag probably wants them to do. But I don't even know he really wants to do that. He feels like he's trying to do something that isn't really his way of playing.
I wonder, and we're going to stay with this in a moment, John. We're going to bring Liverpool into it as well. But I'm curious about where the intersection is between a system which might expose players if you don't have the correct players to play them. Whose fault is it? But before we continue on this laboured search for blame, let's hear something interesting from Phil Hay.
This week's quirky football story comes to you from Bolivia, where poor old Venezuela were sent for a World Cup qualifier. Bolivia is incredibly mountainous, and to maximise that advantage, they played the game in the city of El Alto, which is 4,150 metres above sea level. To give that some context, it's like playing a game halfway up Mount Everest, so proper altitude sickness territory. Venezuela did the best to prepare for it. They did breathing exercises, they used oxygen chambers, but alas, they took a 4-0 thrashing before travelling back down the mountainside. Some would say Bolivia have an unfair advantage, but as the sign in the stadium says, we play where we live, and don't they just? For more tales like that, and for daily updates on the biggest football news straight to your inbox, sign up for the Athletic FC newsletter at the link below.
Thank you, Phil Hay. Oh, what a lovely story from Phil Hay. Now, if you want to subscribe to the Athletic FC newsletter, and you should because it's free and good, and I do, and I'm telling you to, there's a link in the description, so please go and check it out. Now, John, speaking of a mountain to climb, John, let's continue on this vein. How do you differentiate between whether it's a coach's fault or a system's fault, or whether it's a player's fault and the player's making mistakes? Because, forgetting about the long-term element of it for a moment, there will be things to complain about in the next few years, and I don't know how one goes about assessing if Erik ten Hag's doing a good job, if it's some players making individual mistakes.
Well, I think the job of an analyst is to actually try and find the balance between each of those three things that we've mentioned there when they're watching a game, because there's a combination of those three things that allows you to win a game, and those three things are the actual approach that the coach has decided to take, the game plan, the plausibility of that game plan, whether or not the players can actually enact that game plan, and whether or not the coach is able to teach the players how to play in that way. I think this game is really, really interesting because it's a great example of a game where you can easily outcome bias it and say, Manchester United's defensive structure was awful. How could any team possibly use this defensive structure successfully? Well, Liverpool used exactly the same defensive structure pretty much, with a few tweaks here and there. We're not talking about Liverpool's defensive structure because they won the game, so it must have worked, right? But
identity.
It raises the question then, if you can have a structure which is able to work for one team but not the other, like where is it breaking down? Where are the problems coming in? And I think that's where analysis becomes really interesting. So let's just talk about what that defensive structure was. So here's Manchester United in a defensive situation on the board. They're playing this 4-2-4 structure, which everyone seems to be playing at the moment. I seem to be talking about all the time. The reason Man United are doing it is because they were getting caught out through the middle all the time last season. So what they're doing is they're having this really narrow line of four. The idea is to stop the ball from being passed through into central midfielders. And then you should have these compact lines behind it, 4 and 2. And the idea is just block out the middle, force opponents round the edges. And largely this works. They've been better defensively at the beginning of this season than they were at times last season. But there are problems, and one of those problems is that this is very much a sort of comfortable block shape. But at times you're going to want to step up and try and cause the opposition problems with their build-up. So what that usually looks like is the 9 and the 10 jumping up here onto the centre-backs, and that then gives you the problem that you could leave the opposition pivot players free. And then the big question is, how can you generate these moments as a build-up team where you're isolating their pivots and then get the ball into them? Same is absolutely true for Liverpool as well, by the way, because they're pressing out the same structure. Narrow forwards, 2 players behind them, and again the idea is that you want to pull the 9 and the 10 forward and isolate the pivots behind them. Now there is a coaching point to avoid this happening, and that is that you have a centre midfielder behind the pivot player to jump up should the corresponding forward player jump as well. So the idea then is that you should be able to defend yourself properly, but there's going to be situations where you're able to slow the jump down or have another player pulled out of the way. Yeah. But for me, this is what both coaches coming into this game should be thinking. They should be thinking, this is a weakness. If we want to try and cause problems for them in build-up, we talked about how Man United want to bait presses high and then play these dangerous balls. It's a perfect way of doing it if you are able to create space for your players like Casemiro to make those passes that JJ is showing us easier. So this should be a coaching point for me. Both teams should be doing it. But actually in the game, we can see that Liverpool were doing it much better than Manchester United. So this is a scene from the game, and this is Manchester United building up. So we can see that Liverpool are in their narrow 4-2-4, so there's the narrow front two. And already you can see that there's potential space opening around the Manchester United pivots here, Mainu and Casemiro. The idea should be that Gravenberch or McAllister jump up if any danger takes place. So what's going to happen is Onana's going to play the ball out to the centre back here on this side, and that's going to trigger a jump. Actually, they're quite aggressive, Liverpool, so they're jumping with Salah onto the centre back here. And Slot talks about why that's the case, because it's actually a dangerous attacking move on his part, but you can listen to his interview on Sky Sports to find out more about that. In order to make sure that the fullback here isn't free, what they're going to have to do then is jump Gravenberch out to make sure that pass isn't on.
Which seems mad.
It is, yeah, it is mad, because essentially now the area which you're trying to protect, the centre, is now massively underloaded. You've got one player and then potentially 4 Manchester United players around them. So normally what we'd have is the centre-back plays the pass to the full-back. There's now a really easy way of being able to bypass the front line of Liverpool's press. Gravenberch is also going to be taken out. You can see he's not doing a very good job of actually blocking that passing lane. So you would hope that the first time pass from Dalot goes into Mainu. Mainu takes a really positive touch into the space that's opened out, and then suddenly you have 5 Manchester United players against 5 Liverpool players. McAllister is behind the play anyway, so this is a really basic build-up. You've gone goalkeeper, centre-back, full-back, into the centre midfield, and the Liverpool defensive structure is just not performing the function it's supposed to do, which is to block out the centre of the field. However, Manchester United don't do this. I think they end up going back and the opportunity is lost. Now, Liverpool are doing a good job of jumping at these moments. So when this ball arrives, you've got the Liverpool player jumping back and it's going to be pressing from behind. Gravenberch actually arrives quite quickly. So it's not easy, but it is possible. And I think at this level, players should be able to, 1, recognise these sorts of patterns, and 2, they should have been training all week aware of the fact that this is where the weakness lies in the team. If we go to the other side of the pitch, we can see Liverpool doing a much better job of causing this tension, of creating space around the pivots and then finding them. So this is midway through a build-up actually. Liverpool have gone one way and then they've come back the other. That's a really nice way of starting to pull a team apart and create those tensions in the middle of the field. In this instance, Liverpool's slightly different to Manchester United because rather than having their 2 fullbacks high, so this is Andy Robertson, who's the fullback, he's going to sit a bit deeper. They're playing almost with a situational 3 in build-up, with Trent Alexander-Arnold pushing up higher. That means that the space in here that is going to be filled by Szoboszlai. But Szoboszlai filling that space does exactly the same as what Manchester United having a fullback there is. It pulls Gravenberch out for Liverpool. This is going to pull Casemiro out. So again, you're underloading the midfield, and then you're going to find ways of getting the ball into the space that you've opened out. So the ball eventually arrives at Szoboszlai, and as you can see, McAllister, the pivot now, has created space around himself. Szoboszlai plays that first time pass that we didn't see Dalot play, and then McAllister ends up with the ball. He's actually able to bait a number of players in and then play through the lines, and Liverpool have a fairly dangerous attack. You can see there's 4 Liverpool players here in between the Manchester United pressing unit and their defensive unit. So here's a really good example of teams using exactly the same structure one team doing it better than the other. And so I think then the question becomes, it's clearly not the structure that's the issue. Or you could argue that the structure is the issue, but Liverpool are using that structure as well and making it work. I've got really a couple of really nice examples too of this happening where we have the same situation happening, but completely different outcomes on the basis of the way the player acts in that moment. This is another 4-2-4 situation, so it's the same structure. There's the narrow four. I mean, Fernandes has dropped back for some reason, but we've got the same situation here, right? Which is you've got Xerxes. He's supposed to be sitting on the pivot player and then jumping up to the centre back on the ball. And when he does that, Casemiro jumps to cover the player behind him. So in principle, Xerxes should be on the passing lane. So already you're a little bit out here, but we'll let him off for that.
Xerxes.
But here, Casemiro is perfectly positioned so that if the pass comes in, the amount of time it's going to take for the ball to travel to McAllister, Casemiro will be on him and he's going to have nothing but a bounce pass back.
Yeah.
In the end,
nice piggyback.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe win the foul and everything's fine.
Sure.
In the event, the pass is played a few seconds later, and in that time, Casemiro's managed to sort of lose McAllister. McAllister's got separation from him. And not only that, but he's able to receive the ball facing back towards his own goal, and then turn to face the other goal without any pressure on him. And then not on top of that, he then plays a nutmeg through Casemiro's legs to Szoboszlai, who is between the lines and is completely open. So there's like 3 or 4 defensive errors here, which if everyone does this right, if Xerxes is pressing on the passing lane, if Casemiro doesn't lose his man, if Casemiro still steps up to make sure that he can't turn when he has time to do that, and then if he's close enough to him, he's not going to be able to even play the pass in the first place. So all of that results in this situation where the ball goes to Szoboszlai, and this is just a horrible situation to defend. And that's precisely the sort of situation that this system is designed to stop. However, fast forward a few minutes, literally 4 minutes or something. Same situation roughly. So we've got, this time Fernandes is the guy pressing the centre-back. Because he's jumped, Casemiro is going to jump on the pivot player. And this time around, Casemiro stays with his pivot player, no doubt because he's just not done that and probably been shouted at from the sidelines. Puts him under pressure when he receives the ball. This is the first touch of McAllister, who's going to take it back. He's already under enough pressure for this to be a problem for him. And then Casemiro makes the tackle, the slide tackle, into really nice space. Fernandes has the ball, and you would expect them to at least generate a dangerous chance from this sort of situation. So this is 2 situations where everything is exactly the same. The difference is that the details on the first one are off, and in the second one, the details are correct. So does that mean the system does work and the players aren't up to it? Does it mean the system is not consistent enough, and there are going to be situations where you can go from conceding a really dangerous chance to generating a dangerous chance? And I guess the question then is, should the coach be happy with that kind of system? Again, you could argue, are these players not being coached well enough to know the details so that those kind of things are happening regularly? That's basically the conundrum I think every manager has to face. And I think we come out of a game like that and we say, well, obviously Erik ten Hag's system is bad because they lost 3-0. Slot's system is good because they won 3-0. But in principle, both teams defended out of the same structure. Both teams were playing like bait and rush football where they're trying to create space by pulling the opposition forward. And yeah, I think that's what's so fascinating to me. Now, obviously, I think Manchester United deserved to lose based on some of the problems that they were opening out for themselves and some of the decisions that Liverpool made. But there is another world where JJ showed that chance early on. Like that was the first minute.
Yeah.
Bruno Fernandes scores that goal, it changes the situation. The game state changes. Manchester United can maybe sit a little bit deeper and then just hit on the counter, which is perfect for them. Maybe we're having a completely different conversation about what's happened now. So me,
so it's player quality.
I think it's everything. It's the plan, it's the coaching, it's the players, and I think at the moment, obviously Manchester United aren't at a level that they want to be at. And the question that the new owners should be asking is this the way that we want to go forward? Do we think that this is the sort of game model that we want to employ? And I think a lot of people think, no, they should be playing like Pep Guardiola. Well, they're playing very similar to the way that Arne Slot wants to play. And no one's talking about Arne Slot's model as being not good enough to play to win the league title at this point. Maybe we'll have that conversation later in the season. But I think all I'm trying to do here is just add that little level of nuance, which is just because one team lost badly and the other team won, doesn't mean to say that one team's plan was perfect and the other team's wasn't.
Yeah.
There's loads of other things that factors going into that.
And also on players, like it's the player quality. I mean, these are good players on the pitch. It's not necessarily quality, it's maybe profile and what they're good at doing.
Yeah.
Like John said, for some reason Fernandes is in that position where he's dropped in. His decision to drop into that bit for no reason affects the entire rest of the structure, which means that Casemiro then jumps up, but there's a little bit of indecision because like, why are you there? You can see the back line in that example.
Sure.
They're pointing because like that guy should be free, you should be over there because he's not. But then you can't take Fernandes out of the game because he's their most important creative player. So you're dealing with amazing players who don't give you everything, but then also you suffer from it for a little bit.
Well, it's mind bending, isn't it? It's certainly bending mine, John.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. Let's have something a little more light now. Reuben Pinder. We sent him into the athletics office where he already was to ask people, unsuspecting people, who didn't know they were going to be, that's the bit I enjoy, where they think Manchester United will be finishing in the league this season. So let's find out what the top bods at the Athletic really think.
Right, let's go into the Athletic HQ and find out where our experts think United are going to finish this season. Come on, quick question, lads. Where are United going to finish this season? One number.
6th. 20th. 8th.
20th, come on. He's a Leeds fan, doesn't you know. Io, quick question. Where are United going to finish this season?
Oh my God, are you really serious? I actually think 5th or 4th. 5th or 4th?
6th.
Yeah. Okay. Eduardo, new member of staff. Reuben, lovely to meet you. Where are United going to finish this season?
I'm going to say 6th also.
Sixth. The most popular shout so far. Callum, where are United going to finish this season?
5th.
Fifth. Ali?
6th.
Sixth. Nobody's backing them to get Champions League yet. Jack Pitbrook and Jay Harris, our Tottenham continue. Very quick question. Where are Man United going to finish this season?
8th.
Jay, Champions League or no?
No, 6th.
Jacob, where are United going to finish this season?
5th.
Roshane?
7th.
7th. Mark, where are United going to finish this season?
5th or 6th.
Okay. And I'm going to lean across the table. Duncan?
12th.
There you go.
Oh, we found out. Oh, it's the same as everyone. It turns out it's the same as everyone else. Anyway, there we go. Fine. Good fun. Thanks, Reuben. Now, to the point, JJ. What can Manchester United learn from Liverpool? Because Liverpool, of course, they spent years in the wilderness.
Well, Joe, I looked at how Liverpool won the title 30 years after they last won it, because that's what happened. They won the title in 1990 and then didn't win it again. How did they get to there after the dynasty fell because Dalglish left the team? I looked at it, and I spared no expense and used the highest quality technology available to me to produce this graph, which I don't think the staff will replace with something they've made themselves. Now, as you can see, this is what Liverpool's timeline looks like. Again, you're probably looking at it on a better graphic than the one that I drew on an iPad. But this is what happened. It took this long. There's some dips, there's some troughs. That's what happens with any football team. But you see, this is what their managers did. Again, on the graphic that you're seeing, not the one I've got. But this is what happened. So they do quite well. They dip, and naturally you then fire a manager because if you're dipping. Well, it's a catastrophe. You need to fix it, right? And then these are some trophies they won along the way. So they as Ole Solskjaer has said in interviews in the past, sometimes cups or trophies can mask the lack of progression your team is making, because the league table is maybe the best way to judge how you're improving. Do you agree, Joe?
Yeah, imagine masking poor performances with winning trophies.
I can't think of any other examples.
I can't think of any other teams doing that.
Yeah. Well, you've seen what Liverpool's looked like. This is what Man United's timeline since they last won the title is. David Moyes came in, they went to 7th. That is obviously bad. They fired him the same season. And then comes different managers, as you can see along here. Quite a routine hiring and firing. They do a bit well. They reach for the sun, they overshoot it, and then they fire the manager when they dips the next season. So a peak and then a dip, and then you've got rid of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and now we have Ten Hag, who is currently at an all-time low of 8th. Well done. So that's what you had. But of course, they've won trophies along the way. Because we were doing a joke earlier. It was Ten Hag, you see, who's won some trophies along the way.
Yeah.
But if you compare the two side by side, you don't really see much, but it's quite fun to look at, really.
No, I'd like that to look at.
But there's the thing. So like Liverpool up and down, up and down, up and down. Throughout the 90s and the 2000s, they were winning some trophies. They had some good players. They had some of the best players in the world. Suarez, you had Torres, you had Gerrard was obviously there.
Daniel
Jay
Sturridge.
Spearing.
Yes, Jay Spearing, Jimmy Carragher.
Yeah.
So they had all these players, but it wasn't until the transfer committee, led by Michael Edwards and Ian Graham, who wrote this book, it's come out recently, about how they were identifying players through data and then putting them in to suit what Liverpool wanted to do going forward, looking for value, looking for players that didn't cost an arm and a leg that could help them develop and get better and better and better. The right mentality is obviously really important. But it came in round about here. Right. So Rodgers is hired. He has a really great season. They almost win the league. They do come really, really close, but it's unsustainable, and they didn't they couldn't hold it up, right? So there's a dip. So then he's chopped. So then you bring in Klopp, who then, as Ian Graham talks about, listens to what Klopp wants. Well, Klopp listens the other way around, and they work together with the players in mind, data-led, with a clear strategic vision to work towards how they get here. Yes, Klopp is an amazing manager and turned players into what he wanted them to do and use them the right way, but a lot of it's to do with how they, I would say, hired or recruited players that suited the vision, because before then it was mostly buy big, get rid of them. Oh no, we have to change again, and you have a chop and you have a churn.
Andy
of Manchester
Carroll.
players. Andy Carroll, yeah.
Sammy Hoopier.
Carroll, an exact example of a player who didn't really fit the profile of what Brendan Rodgers was doing. They brought in Benteke, who was another one.
Yeah, I think you talked about the transfer committee there. The transfer committee was brought in quite early on, as you said, and as you can see, there's no correlation between that transfer committee coming in and then immediate success. But I think it's quite interesting because in that transfer committee, they had, I think, 5 people. They had the manager, they had the head of recruitment and their chief scout. They had Ian Graham and they had Michael Edwards, who was, I think, technical director at the time. And I think what's interesting about that is that there's a quote in Ian Graham's book, which is called How to Win the Premier League, where he talks about the fact that because all of the people in that transfer committee had veto powers, actually what ended up happening was that they were just blocking each other from getting the prime target. So Brendan Rodgers would want a certain, he would have a list of 5 players that the rest of the transfer committee would veto, and then he would veto their top 5. So Ian Graham's saying we're ending up getting 5th, 6th choices in position. So all that our transfer committee does is mean that we're getting worse players than we would have done if we'd have just gone with one or other of the 2 factors within that, factions within that. Actually, I think the transfer committee then obviously gets replaced eventually and the process becomes more functional. But I think the thing to take away from that is that process takes time. Like Liverpool were owned by smart owners. They brought in really incredibly smart guys in the recruitment
Sounds
department.
like a great idea, that committee.
Yeah, exactly. And
An
you would think,
unexpected twist.
yeah, and yet it takes them 5 years before they start getting the actual processes in place. And so I think the takeaway for Manchester United is that with Ineos coming in within the last 6 months, you shouldn't expect the turnaround to be that quick because processes take time to implement. And we can't know what those processes are standing from the vantage point that we have. But what we can know is that I think it's far too early to be starting to judge whether or not we think their processes are bad at this point. They have to be given time to implement those processes. And along the way, it may look like they're making big mistakes because that's just the nature of implementing processes. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. So where do you think Man United are then on Liverpool's spectrum?
Well, I would say, obviously there's not totally correlated here because there's a lot more years to Liverpool. I would say if you expanded it or shrunk it, whichever you want to do it, I would say that Man United could be, if you speed things on, they could be exactly where Liverpool were under Rodgers. So they had a high of like second, and then they've dropped down to somewhere where they don't want to be. So roughly around about this area here. So normally, well, here, what Liverpool did was they got rid of Brendan Rodgers and brought in Jurgen Klopp, one of the greatest managers in, we'll say, history. Why not? Mm-hmm. So then what you have is Man United have to decide whether Ten Hag is one of the greatest managers in history who can take them up the way, if they rely on the recruitment and go the way that way, or they keep buying some players that kind of suit what he wants to do. They keep buying players that appease fans and make the media think more of them because they've signed a big money player. So they could be in a place where they're about to then rocket towards set third and seconds and first in Champions League trophies. But as John's saying, it depends a lot on the process that they adopt and how long they go with it. If Ten Hag's there at the end of the season, then they're trying to stick with that and take some continuity and build on it. If they were to get rid of Ten Hag at some point in this season and bring in someone else, then perhaps they're at the start now where that manager would listen to what the recruitment people are doing, because that will all be in place at some point soon, you'd think, and then they'll go from there. So they could be at the start of something good. They could also be right back around about the Benitez Julia years.
It's all about process, isn't it? And I think that's why clubs like Brighton and Liverpool, who are process-heavy clubs, have been able to just bring in another manager who is happy to accept the process, and it's worked out successfully from them. The big question for Man United is if they can put their process in place and then find a manager who's willing to accept the process that they want to implement. And I think that's the big question.
Maybe it's Ten Hag.
He loves process, doesn't he?
Process.
Okay.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football, and you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.